Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of our malicious compliance. Tell us the right time. For many years, my family would take trips with other family members. All of these trips had one thing in common: my aunt, uncle, and cousins would be late for everything. This used to really irritate my parents, who are pretty punctual and a lot more kids to organize, four of us, compared to my two cousins. By mutual agreement, any other family involved in these outings decided to go along with my parents give aunt and uncle the wrong time. For example, if an event started at 11 a.m., they'd be told 10 a.m. This was pretty effective until aunt and uncle started realizing they were being given the wrong time. I believe other family members explained why that was and that they were fed up with always waiting on them or being late. Self-awareness not being very apparent that they were the issue, it was decided by them that it wasn't their fault, and they told my parents, "Give us the right time from now on and you'll see, we aren't the problem." My parents, especially my mom, hates the idea of people missing out on something but is also prepared to let a natural consequence occur if it's not too harsh. The very next week we had a day trip booked on the ferry. This was something we did once a year, over to the UK and back in one day. Fondly known as a booze cruise back in the day due to the opportunity to purchase cheap alcohol. Kids would explore the ship, and when we docked, raid the pick and mix in Woolworths and buy confection that we couldn't get at home. It was something everyone looked forward to a lot. What can I say, it was the early 90s. With the best will in the world, the ferry waits for no man. So it was a sad day for four people who were told the ferry left at 8 a.m. sharp, the correct time, and who arrived after 8:30 to see a small, ferry-shaped speck in the distance, heading towards the UK. Sadly, it didn't make them any more punctual after that, but they were always told the correct time as requested, and if they were late, we didn't wait anymore. For months, whenever we'd see them after that, my parents used to cheerily wave and say, "Very nice to see you." Next story. Won't pay out my PTO? Well, can I take PTO and work? At my last job I given them notice, and I had assumed they'd cut me a check for the 55 hours of PTO I had left over. But no, they said I would lose it if I don't use it. So I went ahead and used my PTO for the last 55 hours I was scheduled to work because I wasn't about to waste that. But then I remembered a time a few weeks back. I had taken PTO, but then I had worked about 30 minutes into my PTO. I ended up earning time and half, as with my PTO plus 30 minutes of extra work. I enjoyed my coworkers, I wasn't working, so I sent an email to my manager. "Hey Mark, I know we are a bit understaffed and I know I took PTO already, but I wouldn't mind working anyway, is that okay to work?" Mark responds, "Yes, we'd be happy to have you." My hourly rate was $25 at that point, time and half puts me at $37.50, which I was fine with earning. So come my second hour of Thursday I will be earning time and half. So I worked, had fun. Come Monday after my last day my old boss calls me and says, "Did you work 135 hours last pay period?" No, I worked 80 hours, and I used 55 hours of PTO, cause, like, your overtime pay put us over budget. I said, "Yeah, that sucks. You did say I was good to work despite the fact I had scheduled PTO, right?" Him. I did. "Yeah, thanks." He starts laughing. "Yes, I got paid. Company now pays out PTO when you quit cause of me." In the end they paid me $2,062 in overtime pay, plus the 80 hours I worked earned me $2,000. So typically 80 hours of work would cost them $2,000, but because they wouldn't pay me out my PTO they ended up paying double, when they could have just cut me a check for $1,375 and saved $700. Essentially, in their effort to rip me off my benefit, I made them pay $700 for their greed. I made sure to get permission to come to work, despite the fact that I had already scheduled my PTO. For your information, previously in another interaction I was told once PTO was approved, it can't be cancelled. Edit. In my state not paying out for PTO is perfectly legal and fine. In my company PTO is treated in terms of pay the same as hours worked. So in a bi-weekly pay period I'm scheduled to work 80 hours, 40 hours per week. I noticed if overtime pay went above 40 hours I still got paid time and a half. So here is the math: I was supposed to work 80 hours. I had 55 hours of PTO to use. So I took all of that, which mean I was going work 25 hours, and take off 55 hours. Now instead of taking those 55 hours, I worked them. But I was still using PTO. So I got my $25 for my 80 hours, and then I got $37.50 per hour for my 55 hours. This resulted in a gross pay of $4,062. Had the company simply wrote me a check for my PTO, that would have been $1,375, plus my 80 hours would have been $2,000 for a total of $3,375, so the company basically paid me $700 more than they could have because they were trying to be greedy. Next story. It's us or grad school. I used to work for a company that advertises knights, horses, and real weapons. If you know, you know. I was a follow spot operator. Basically, you point the big light at the horsey man to highlight them. The company didn't seem to like hiring extra people for that position, and in hindsight, the turnover rate was pretty high. Plus, pay was $10 an hour. This is all important. During my work there, I had had major surgery which out me out for 2 months, requiring quitting and hiring back. That never seemed to be an issue. A few months after that, I developed a pre-septic bacterial infection to a mild form of sepsis. My fever was 103, and my heart rate kept going up. I was sick. This necessitated me being out for a week. However, for some reason, I had to miss an extra night of work and forgot to call in, largely because my meds knocked me out. This was my bad. Again, important. At the same time, I'd been accepted into graduate school and had a class that met one Saturday a month. I was called into my boss's office to discuss the no-call, no-show. The conversation went as follows. Manager: hey, OP, you did a no-call, no-show. That's pretty bad. Me: I'm sorry, I sent you an email and a doctor's note after, as soon as I could. I understand this is an issue though. Manager: well, you've been written up for it, but that's not what concerned me enough to call you in today. Me: oh? Manager: you're asking for a Saturday off every month. That's our highest attendance day, we can't do that. Me: I thought with enough advance notice you could schedule around me. Manager: see, that's just the problem. We've had to constantly lean into your needs, and now it's time for you to consider our needs, and your team's needs. Me: what are you saying? Manager: it's either us or this class. Me: I need this class for full-time attendance, I can't drop it. Manager, smugly: well, I guess we'll see where we are in 2 months. Me: okay. I left his office and told my coworkers I liked goodbye. Then I clocked out. He comes storming out to my truck screaming at me, asking how I could quit on him like that. I told him he wanted me to choose between grad school or this rinky-dink job, and I made my decision. I then took off the costume belt and handed it to him, saying I'd bring the rest back when I had time. A week later, I got my first real stagehand job that paid $20 an hour. So yeah, F you dude. I have a master's now and I'm set to start teaching at colleges this next semester, and I'm a pro stagehand. Never give your employees crappy ultimatums. Next story. I got rid of them, boss, just like you asked. This took place where I work at a funeral home. We had several sets of straps for our lowering device, the thing that slowly lowers a coffin into the ground, and orders came from one of the managers to get rid of all the sets we had as new ones were coming in. I tried to protest that the new ones had arrived and were already in rotation, but was ignored. Gather up all the straps and get rid of them. Sir, yes sir. Initially I was instructed to throw them out, but I asked to keep them instead. I was told that they had to leave the premises, one way or the other. So I took them and gave them to a friend of mine for safekeeping. A month later, I have that same manager come up to me asking how many sets of straps we have. I reply with none. He asks about the new ones that had come in. I inform him that they left the premises a month prior as per his instructions. He flies into a panic and is about to berate me for throwing them out when I tell him to relax, I can bring them back in. Bring them back in the next day, no harm and no foul. Certainly bruised that manager's ego a bit and made him think about what he says next time though. Next story. The new fence. Recalling this story made my heart smile. A few years ago, I was building a new fence for a friend of mine. I had to remove the old sections that were falling apart, first, of course, and when I got to the intersection of his back fence, his side fence, and the next door neighbor's back fence, I carefully separated the neighbor's fence from his, and proceeded to carry on removing the side sections that went between their two properties. My friend had told me that the side section was 100% on his property, and that the previous owner, 30 plus years ago, had deliberately given the next door neighbor's property an extra foot or so, to ensure that he was building on his own property, without calling for and paying for a survey. The neighbor, Susan, whom I will refer to as Karen for the remainder of this story, came running outside screaming at me that I couldn't remove the side fence and it was their property and just what do I think I'm doing? I responded back, very calmly, that my friend had told them well in advance that he was going to replace the fence, that he was just going to build it in the same place as the old one, and asked if they were willing to split the costs, to which they declined. No biggie. Karen started screaming at me again, telling me I had no right to do that, and that my friend didn't give them proper notice, and that she didn't realize that there wouldn't be anything between their two properties to contain their dog. By now, I'm about ready to lose my crap, so I knocked on my friend's back door to let him know what was going on, and that he needed to talk to Karen, and that I was leaving because I didn't want to do or say anything I would regret, or cause problems with the neighbors for my friend. The entire project got put on hold, pending a property survey that was going to cost $650, and that they demanded my friend pay half of, despite him telling them that the fence was definitely on his property, and nothing was going to change with the new fence, and that he was fine with them continuing to have a foot or so of his property, so that he didn't have to rock the boat. Fast forward to the following Monday when the surveyor comes out. Turns out, the old side fence was not a little on my friend's property, but almost 10 feet onto his property, and the neighbors had built up raised flower beds and done a nice brick retaining wall right up along the fence line, that they had spent a lot of money just in materials for, never mind the time they put in constructing it. Needless to say, my friend came away with the biggest crap-eating grin. For the mere price of $325, he was entitled to expand his yard of more than 30 years, by about 800 square feet, and Karen and her husband, who happened to be the polar opposite of his wife in personality, and was super nice, spent the next week moving their garden, retaining wall, and all of the dirt that was on my friend's property, so that I could build the fence on his side of the actual property line. They then hired the cheapest contractors they could find to slap up a fence on their side of the property line. They spent almost as much as my friend did on their new fence. I gave my friend the friends and family discount. 3 years later, the last 20 feet or so of their fence is on the ground already, because it was such a crappy job that it fell over in a moderate windstorm this past spring. My friend's fence is still standing, rock solid, and his dogs are definitely making good use of the extra 800 square feet. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel or posts.